it is an unfortunate situation that Rutendo Matinyarare could not access the stream tonight. We've tried everything possible, and that's why I'm just bringing out this heartbreaking announcement to us tonight. So, but what we're doing in the background is trying to put out this presentation that he had already prepared to lecture us today on the current situation of the U.S. Zimbabwe sanctions. And so we would be streaming this on a premiere for you who have actually waited and looking forward to this presentation tonight. It is so sad. Our brother Rutendo is currently really under sanctions himself, right? He's attacked, as you all know. He has no access to internet. He has no access to his iPhone or to his internet devices like computer. Everything has just been shut down. Once he proposed to go live, you know, it's just the way it is, as you understand. So we need to support Rutendo. I'm calling out and appealing to all of us who are actually interested and motivated in his work, in his engagement, to support Rutendo. We just created a WhatsApp group called the Rutendo Support Group for the U.S. Sanctions on Zimbabwe and also his activism. You know, sometimes really fighting as a freedom fighter, we need the support of every collect individual to be able to push this process forward. You know, it is an appeal personally coming from us on the Pan-African Daily TV. Anyhow that we need to support Rutendo, it is all welcome. Yeah, so once more, I do apologize. We've been struggling for the past 2 hours. Rutendo is sitting here totally frustrated. And yeah, you can understand the spirit. But of course, what he had to say, he was to stay, you know, Rutendo. Apart from just being an activist or an advocate or a social entrepreneur, Rutendo is actually doing everything possible to empower every young African on the continent, particularly the Zimbabweans. He has changed a lot. He has achieved a lot. And tonight was the night where we had to celebrate, you know, all his achievement, despite the challenges that he's going through. So I'm truly sorry, and I'm apologizing on his behalf that he cannot be live with us today. But notwithstanding, you're going to watch the presentation that he had for us today, even though he tried to actually summarize and comprise it. But the most thing, or one very important fact that Rutendo needs from us now is just that support for him to continue his activism, his advocacy, and the empowering of young Africans worldwide, particularly in Zimbabwe. Yeah, so if you want to support the Rutendo action, just text us on our WhatsApp on +49 1578 211 2379, and you give the code Rutendo. I mean, we're creating a special group just for him. He needs our support morally, financially, you know, spiritually, anyhow that we can do to keep this brother untouched and untouchable. Yeah, so enjoy the program tonight, and we see us tomorrow live on the Pan-African Daily TV. Stay healthy, stay safe, and keep the spirit burning. Bye-bye. Good night.
In many African cultures, 40 represents the passing of an older generation, the ascendancy of a new generation, and the renewal of the nation into the future. As Zimbabweans, we are blessed to be celebrating 41 years of independence, in which our parents fought for our liberation, and now we, their children, as they go into the sunset of retirement, have matured to defend this independence that they have given us. Many nations do not want us to enjoy this independence, but we, the new generation, shall defend this nation because our parents lost their lives, limbs, sanity, and shed blood so that you and I could have access to land, control of our mineral resources, control of our labor so that we are no longer slaves or human resources, but we've become the human talent that comes together and unites to build and restore the Zimbabwe empire of old. They have given us control of our gold, our financial institutions, to ensure that we can rebuild this and restore the great trading Mutapa empire. But this has been resisted by the Rhodesians and 15,000 mercenaries from all over the world that were being financed by the United States. They came from Britain, Portugal, apartheid South Africa, Brazil, Israel, the entire Western world in order to protect white supremacy in Southern Africa. This was in line with what Henry Kissinger wrote in NSSM 200, where he said white people cannot allow defeat on the African continent because then this would radicalize Africans and ensure that they fight white supremacy on African soil. But 16-year-old Zimbabweans rose, took firearms, defeated white supremacy in Zimbabwe, and they became a threat to global white supremacy. By winning that war, they earned the right to give back unto Zimbabweans that which was stolen from them. They, together with the Angolans, now had the right to restore Africans to what they were before. But the Americans and their Monroe Doctrine, together with Western imperialism, did not accept this, so they called this communism. They called it communism because it went against what their Pope said in 1454 when he said that they must go and conquer 9 white worlds and non-Christian worlds in what was called the law of discovery. That law of discovery is the doctrine upon which the United States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and a number of nations in South America are founded upon, where they believe that they have a divine right to murder natives and to establish their nations. And today, these colonies that have murdered natives continue to try and stop the emancipation of Africans by fighting the most radical movement on the African continent, Zimbabwe. And when Zimbabwe got its independence, the CIA joined hands with the apartheid government to start destabilizing those countries that had won their liberation by war. They started to destabilize Angola, Mozambique, and Zimbabwe. The CIA used the apartheid government to destabilize the entire SADC region so that SADC could never be able to launch an attack to defeat apartheid by military means. However, they were going to raid Zimbabwe with their dissidents that they were training in Paraboa. Super Zapu was being trained to destabilize Zimbabwe. Renamo was being trained to destabilize Mozambique, while UNITA was being trained to destabilize Angola, all with the assistance of the CIA, who were assisting Renamo from Malawi and the Comores, and also the CIA assisting in Angola, where the South African government invaded. The South African government would bomb Zimbabwe and assassinate ANC officials in Zimbabwe. A state security council was created by the apartheid government that was a partnership between the military of South Africa together with their companies like Old Mutual, Anglo America, and the Rupert Empire. They would sabotage Africa economically with sanctions. They would sabotage Africa with wars and destabilizations and assassinations, all the way until Zimbabwe fought back. Zimbabwe was fighting back, coming out of 90 years of colonialism, 17 years of liberation war, 14 years of UN sanctions imposed on Rhodesia, and the Americans imposed these sanctions knowing that the underdevelopment that was going to happen in Rhodesia would be passed on to a new black country which they wanted to struggle. But this was after they had already robbed the country of unpaid rents of $580 billion for the land that they were holding during the colonial period. They had robbed us of our labor, $340 billion in unpaid labor, and they had stolen our mineral resources, $600 billion of stolen resources. And even when we got our independence, we had to buy land to show that we were ready to reconcile with the whites. We had to pay Rhodesian debts. We had to inherit 14 years of UN sanctions under development. We had to inherit 90 years of colonial underdevelopment. And over and above that, the West were sponsoring the apartheid government to impose 12 years of sanctions on a newly independent Zimbabwe. Eventually, because of fighting wars in Zimbabwe and Mozambique, building schools and roads and developing the country from the underdevelopment of colonialism, we needed to borrow money from multilateral Indian institutions, and this brought about ISAP. And even though they tried to fight Zimbabwe, Zimbabwe's bones of Nehanda rose and continued to fight for Pan-Africanism on the African continent. The bones of Nehanda would fight in Zimbabwe against terrorists who wanted to separate the Zimbabwean people. They would go to fight in Mozambique against Renamo to protect our pipeline and to protect Mozambique from imperialism. They would even go on a UN mission all the way to Somalia to protect the Somalian people from warlords. And in the process, they ended up saving the lives of U.S. Marines after Black Hawk Down, in which they saved the Marines by giving them a path to safety at the Mogadishu airport. The West would sponsor Rwandan and Ugandan-backed rebels to try and destabilize Congo, to remove Kabila, who wanted to emancipate his people, so that the UN could divide Congo into 5 separate states that would be easy to loot. But Zimbabwe sent its soldiers there together with Namibia and Angola and issued the Sun City Accord that ensured that Congo remains as a country even till today. The Zimbabwean soldiers would then go to Chad, Sudan. Today we have South Sudan because of what it is that was done by the Zimbabwean government in Sudan. They went to Equatorial Guinea and Angola and ended the reign of our rebel fighter of UNITA. All this did not make the West happy. The West were unhappy by the role that was being played by Zimbabwe, by its defeat of imperialism, and so they began to look at imposing sanctions. They created MDC to take power, but when NDC lost its elections in 2000, then we saw the United States imposing ZIDERA sanctions in 2001. They imposed these sanctions to stop land reform and to try and force the Zimbabwean people to elect another president in the presidential elections of 2002. 2002, Robert Mugabe would ask EU observers to leave because of their favoritism. Immediately, the EU imposed sanctions. After those sanctions, Robert Mugabe won the 2002 presidential elections, and immediately the United States imposed what was called a national emergency upon Zimbabwe, saying that it is a threat to the national security interests, economic interests, and foreign policy interests of the United States. This was immediately followed by sanctions that were called Executive Orders 13288, and then these were amended and increased again in 2005 as EO 13391, and then amended again by a black president, Barack Obama, into EO 13469 that put the government of Zimbabwe as a threat to the United States government. They immediately deployed a weapon called the International Emergency Economic Powers Act to cripple Zimbabwe further by attacking its economic engine. This then gives me a chance to explain these sanctions a bit more in detail. ZIDERA is US, EU, Canada, and Australia using their directors in multilateral lending institutions to deny Zimbabwe reconstruction and development loans that were promised at Lancaster House Conference, by the way, and over and above that, blocking the cancellation of those colonial debts we spoke about. The executive order sanctions target the economy and the engine of Zimbabwe to ensure that Zimbabwe cannot develop and use its land. So no US company, financial institution, companies of US partner nations, or any other companies from any other nation that wants to do business with the United States and the EU can make payments, clear payments, or hold accounts, give loans, invest or fund, trade, transfer technology, software, machinery, or give assistance. This is humanitarian assistance or NGO aid or other assistance like lobbying to Zimbabwe without a license from the US president. These sanctions are upon the Zimbabwean government, its ministries, companies owned by the Zimbabwean government by more than 51%, politicians, and 144 special designated nationals, and anyone who does business with them. This basically is the entire country of Zimbabwe that is under sanctions. And what it is that the United States says is, you're either with us or against us. And they put diplomatic pressure on other nations that are not in Europe to also impose the sanctions they've imposed or face penalties or secondary sanctions. What is the problem that these sanctions cause? They cause an economic war, a war that stops us from being able to participate in fair and free international trade. They block our ability to get payments. They block our ability to get technology and machinery to upgrade our country and our system of industry. They isolate the nation. Diplomatic relations business relations, investment. They incapacitate our industry because we can't retool. They break what we call partner bank relationships or linkages with other banks. They cause dependency so that we depend on NGOs and aid. They cause these people who give us aid to then influence us and to instill a psychological warfare with lies and sentiments that are negative, so that we have an attitude and behavior that causes us to begin to fight one another, that fragments and divides our nation and causes us to have a civil war, civil disobedience that puts people against the government so that there can be a foreign government intervention. Now, how much have we lost because of these sanctions? It is very difficult to quantify, but let me just show you what we call the GDP parity comparison. We were almost twice as big as Zambia in 2001 when the sanctions started. But today, Zambia is bigger than us. And when you look at that, we have lost up to $26.6 billion because of these sanctions just in our GDP. There are multiplier effects to that. And what we need to now start concerning ourselves with is that since 1979, when the National Emergency Act was created, 86% of all 34 executive order sanctions that come with the national emergency on third world countries have turned into wars or civil wars. Zimbabwe has 3 national emergencies and executive orders that have been imposed on it. So we need to be careful. We need to be concerned. The problem with these sanctions that the US and EU have imposed is that they are unilateral and therefore they are crimes against humanity. This means that the UN is not involved in imposing these sanctions. Other nations that are non-white, a world of nations that are supposed to come together and make decisions, were excluded from this decision making. So these sanctions are unilateral, indiscriminate, disproportionate, and unreasonable collective punishment of civilians, investors, entrepreneurs, public officials who have never been investigated, tried, or found guilty in any international court for the human rights violations that these Western countries say we are perpetuating, yet they are the ones that are violating our rights. These sanctions deprive our civilians of basic human rights: food, clean water, development, sovereignty, legal and political, social and cultural rights. And thousands of Zimbabweans have been killed, 3 million externally displaced. And when you think that Congo, after 25 years of war, has had 5 million displaced, you realize just how deep this problem is. It is a war. It is a carpet bombing of the Zimbabwean people. They deprive people of their democratic rights because they force people to vote for anything other than the ruling party. That is not democracy. It's free and unfair. And then they also deprive people of the right to make their own laws. They are telling us how to make laws in Zimbabwe. Right now, we've got a constitution that was influenced by the West that has caused us to compensate white farmers because of the coercion of these illegal sanctions. When we try to come up with a broader picture of how much we've lost, everything we've lost during colonialism, and I think we had about 800 billion lost there, we are now also losing more money from the brain drain. 3 million people, their brains, their ideas, their intellectual property is lost to us. The taxes these people could be paying to the Zimbabwean government are lost to us. Our infrastructure is not being maintained, and to replace that infrastructure right now, we need about $23.3 billion. When we look at the money that is running out of Zimbabwe as externalization because of the fact that we no longer have the skills and the institutions to be able to fight this corruption, we're looking at about $19.9 billion. And just the trade in SADC alone, 51 billion that we've missed out. And the trade with the international community and the international world, 49 billion. When you look at this figure, we're looking at trillions of dollars that have been lost to imperialism over the years. So what are the solutions? The solutions is very important. The people are the most important of our solutions. We need to unite. The people of Zimbabwe need to get knowledge of what imperialism is about and unite ourselves. We need to re-energize the anti-sanctions campaign, blockade the US embassy, and maybe the US need to leave our country if they are going to perpetuate crimes against humanity upon our people. We need to build our identity, our national interest, our national image and pride by telling the story of Zimbabwe. We are an older nation that's older than most of these European countries, and we are a nation that used to trade with the world before the Europeans get here. We can survive without them, and Zimbabweans need to know that. We need to challenge the delegitimacy. I mean, the Zimbabwean government is elected by 2/3 of the people. It's a legitimate government. It has never been found guilty of crimes against humanity. So there is nothing called crimes against humanity that have never been proved in a court of law. Our government is very legitimate and it has protected our resources. That's why it's under sanctions. We have to challenge incapacity by investing collectively, by making sure that we produce on the land, produce our own food, mine our own minerals and process those minerals, and also manufacture the tools and equipment that we need in manufacturing, production of agricultural products and mining. We need to ensure that we attract other black people from the diaspora, African Americans. We have to break dependency on whites. We have to produce our own seeds, produce our own foods, and make sure that even our own medicines, we use our educated workforce to produce this. We have to challenge the attitudes of despondency, of negativity, to make Zimbabweans know that they are the ones that must build Zimbabwe. They are the ones that have to take Zimbabwe forward. We must defend our nation. That is a constitutional mandate. Defend our nation from sanctions, from warfare, from division. And we also have to take these illegal sanctions to international courts to challenge the legality and to bring back our humanity as Zimbabweans, because these illegal sanctions are dehumanizing us. And it's as if the Americans feel that we don't have human rights. And then we have to continue to teach and give people awareness of how sanctions work. People must understand that these sanctions are a violation of their rights, and we as human beings must claim our rights by fighting this injustice. And for all this to happen, we need assistance. We need your help. We are the front line of this fight, fighting this psychological war, and we need the assistance of NGOs, government, media, funders, influencers, and all other types of humanitarian organizations across the world. And we are that front line. We are that new generation that is fighting for the emancipation of Zimbabweans, and we will continue to fight.
Zimbabwe, Zimbabwe, Zimbabwe. Every man got a right to decide his own destiny. Yes. And on this judgment, there is no partiality. Yes, Zimbabwe. So arm in arm with arms, we'll fight this little struggle. Zimbabwe, cause that's the only way we can overcome our little trouble. Zimbabwe, brother, you're right. Sister, you're right. You're so right. You're so right. We're gonna fight. We're gonna fight. We have to fight. Yes, we have to fight. Fight for our right. Natty dread in a Zimbabwe. Set it up. Zimbabwe, mash it up in a Zimbabwe. Africans are liberate. Zimbabwe, yes. No more internal power struggle. No more internal power struggle. We come together to overcome our little troubles. Zimbabwe, Zimbabwe. Soon we'll find out we are the real revolutionary. Freedom for Zimbabwe. Cause I don't want my people to be contrary. Yes, Zimbabwe. Brother, you're so right. Sister, you're right. You're right. We'll have to fight. Yes, we're gonna fight. We'll have to fight. Fighting for our right. Mash it up in a Zimbabwe. Natty trash, eating a Zimbabwe. Africans are liberate. Zimbabwe. Inna a liberate. Zimbabwe. Brother, you're so right. Sister, you're right. You're damn right. We're gonna fight. We're gonna fight. Fighting for our rights. Zimbabwe. To divide and rule only can tear us apart. In every chest, there beats a heart.